Today on Prophecy Focus, we will examine the fifth part of government's progression towards a one world global system as we look at communism today. I'm Dr. Richard Schmidt, founder of Prophecy Focus Ministries and pastor at Union Grove Baptist Church in Union Grove, Wisconsin. And with me today once again is my good friend and colleague, Josh Steele. Josh, I really appreciate your Bible teaching. I love your scholarship that you bring to the table. And I'm looking forward to going through the next progression, if you will, in this movement, if you will, towards a one world government.
Well, thanks, Rich. It's great to be back here again. I think this is show number 5 for me, so it's been a great time. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's good that you pointed out now you're a seasoned veteran. You got 5 shows under your belt, and it's just been a pleasure to have you here and to work along with you as we study God's Word. And as we like to say here at Prophecy Focus, we love to study God's prophetic Word one passage at a time. There is so much information, so much prophecy that's contained in this Bible. And Josh, it's interesting statistically, there's an individual, and I think we might have mentioned it before on the program, Dr. John Walvoord, one of the great theologians of the literally the past generation, was president of Dallas Seminary for a time, just an absolute scholar when it came to the prophetic word. But he wrote a book which I recommend people get. I love the book. It's called Every Prophecy of the Bible. Every single prophecy, Genesis to Revelation, is pointed out in that one volume. 1/3 of our Bible is Bible prophecy. He goes through there from Genesis to Revelation in chronological order, points out these prophecies. And what's interesting, this is just so fascinating, 50% of all the prophecies have been fulfilled. That's like 500 prophecies have already been fulfilled, which means there's 500 more to be fulfilled. Now, Josh, we're talking about things that have not happened yet, but that God said will happen.
Yeah, and the 500 that have been fulfilled are down to the finest detail, meaning that it was not coincidence or random chance that those were fulfilled. They were fulfilled specifically, intentionally, and so we know the next 500 will also be fulfilled in the same way.
All right, and that's very important. Folks, God has a perfect record. 500 prophecies fulfilled exactly as stated. That's unbelievable, but it is believable because God performed it and actually made it happen. Well, let's go to today's program content. We're going to talk again about government's progression to the one world global system. Again, 3 specific things are scheduled to happen in the future. The Antichrist, if you will, is going to do 3 major things. He's going to cause a one world government, a one world economy, and a one world religion. Right now we're examining things, Josh, basically as to a scale of how we're going to get to that one world government. Now, it's not something we embrace. It's not something we want. We are not globalists. We basically, if you gave us a name, we'd probably call ourselves nationalists. But why, from your perspective, is it important that we understand why these things are taking place, not just around the world, but right here in America? Why do we care about this?
Well, the Antichrist and his government, his one world government that you just described, is not something that's going to happen overnight. To go from freedom and capitalism right to that's not going to happen. It's going to be a progression, a slow, gradual change over time from one step to the next. And we have looked at 4 of those steps. Tonight we're going to look at the 5th and final step in that order.
All right, so today what we're going to be hitting is, if you will, the granddaddy of them all, known as communism. Folks, if you have any inkling about folks that have lived in communist countries, or many that have been able to escape communist countries and have come here to America, and you listen to the story of those who have fled those countries, the horrific violence that takes place, the economic unbelievable trouble that takes place, the dictatorial ways things are run, cutting out of media, cutting out of social networks and so forth, like we enjoy here in America still with the internet. All these things come to an end when you have a worldwide, we're not at a worldwide dictator yet, are we?
Not quite.
Not quite. But folks, that was on purpose, because one day there is going to be this world dictator that is going to put every single person under his one world government, religion, and economy. Well, let's get into that, and we're now, and Josh, why don't you just very quickly walk us through where we've been and now to where we're at, and then we're going to do some work on what is communism and why it's a problem.
All right, so we started with the welfare state, and we looked at that in detail, and then that leads into socialism, and that, of course, then follows into Marxism, which is all the ideology. And then the last program, we looked at cultural Marxism, which is the implication of those ideologies in a rational way and seeing them played out in our culture. And then, of course, tonight, those things all lead and point to, as you said, communism.
All right, so we encourage you, if you've not seen our first 4 programs on this, they're all, you can see them on vcy.tv, vcy.tv, they're all there. We're thankful to VCY for what they do, but everything's there on the internet. All these programs are available, and we encourage you to go there. It's under Favorite Bible Teachers. You can look up Prophecy Focus and watch all the programs that we've done. Now, there's well over 100 programs out there that we've done over the last couple of years, so we invite you to do that. Well, Josh, let's turn to this concept of communism, and let's give a definition so people understand exactly what it is, because many folks here, fortunately, they've not been under communism, they may not be familiar with it, and I think we need to let them understand it. So if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So communism, first of all, it's a system in which goods are owned in common and are available to all as needed. It's also a theory advocating elimination of private property, which is something we have talked about in previous episodes.
Okay, well, let's keep going then.
Also a doctrine based on revolutionary Marxian socialism and Marxism, Leninism, that was the official ideology of the Soviet Union. It's also a totalitarian system of government in which a single authoritarian party controls state-owned means of production. Also a final stage of society in Marxist theory in which the state has withered away, economic goods are distributed equitably. Lastly, communist systems collectively.
All right, now this is a very generous definition, if you will, of communism. It almost gives it a little bit of a romantic flavor, if you will. Well, here's the good things about communism. All right, so let's examine this. Now, again, as hard as it is, Josh, we're trying not to make political statements here, but we're looking at an ideology that is going to lead to the fulfillment of the prophetic scriptures. So when we're looking at these things, America and the world, not just America, but the world is, there are literal communist countries that exist. America is not one of them at this point. So what we're seeing is in countries that are controlled, if you will, by a communist regime, the concept of money becomes almost moot because everybody basically does what? They get the same thing. How are individuals treated in a communist society? Do they have individual freedoms?
There's really zero individual freedoms, and that's really the focus of Marx was take away the individual. It's all about the collective. It's all about the state and being in a group. No more individuals and no more individual freedoms.
All right, so it's like prophecy focus. Why do we care about this? The reason we care about it, the reason we're pointing these things out is that there's people all over the world and right here in America that are watching these things happen. And our position is that these things are not by accident. These things are happening because it's the way the satanic realm, which God is allowing to, if you will, do this work, is moving the world towards that one world system where Satan's, if you will, minion, the Antichrist and the false prophet, the satanic trinity from Revelation 13, will take over and rule this world for 7 years. Now, Josh, one thing we're going to add in our program today at the end, we're going to find out why. Why is God going to allow these 7 years of horrible tribulation, horrible dictatorship, horrible persecution and suffering for those that come to Christ? Don't tell the answer yet. I want them to watch and see this, but we're going to see exactly why that's taking place.
And it's important that we understand that, because if you don't have that, you can tend to be kind of down in the dumps, if you will, about seeing these things happen, because it's like we're asking the same question: why would this be allowed? We're gonna find out.
Yeah, why the devaluing of the dollar? Why are people being put in these individualistic categories? Why is freedom slowly eroding? All these different things are heading towards Bible prophecy being fulfilled. And we actually talked a little bit about it before we went on air today. The importance of understanding, folks, listen, don't be in despair. Don't think, oh, how are we going to make it? What's going to happen? And we can get very, very down, and understandably so, because you're seeing some of these things starting to happen. The good news is, folks, the more these things happen, the closer it is to the return of Christ, when he's going to take us home to be with him. The Antichrist is not on the scene yet. We're not in the tribulation yet. The good news is Jesus Christ will come back and take his children home before these things are implemented. And Josh, why is it important for us, why we have this chance to share the gospel with people at this particular juncture?
Well, time is limited. We don't know when the rapture is going to happen, and we don't know when that 7 years is going to start. It'll be soon after that rapture event. But right now we have an opportunity to share God's love, to share the gospel of Christ. And so we need to use the time and use it wisely to do that, because we don't know when these things will happen.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're watching today and you are a Christian, you put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that one day you're going to heaven. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, Josh, and I love this. God has given you a very, very important job to do. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, the Apostle Paul tells us that we are God's ambassadors. We've been called to serve him and tell others about Christ. So the worse it gets, the more trouble that we see, the more persecution and suffering that may be happening on this earth, boy, this is an opportune time to reach out to folks and tell them the greatest news ever given to mankind, that Christ Jesus came into this world to save sinners. 1 Timothy 1:15, Luke chapter 19 and verse 10. All right, well, let's move on. We've already talked about Karl Marx. I just want to very quickly remind folks, Josh, if you wouldn't mind, what is a biblical worldview? Here's where we're trying to get to from a Christian standpoint and not get sidetracked by all the, if you will, socialism and Marxism and all these other things. How should we respond to all these things taking place today?
Well, we've got to look at it through the lens of the Bible. So someone with a biblical worldview believes their primary reason for existence is to love and serve God. This personal worldview, it's a combination of all we believe to be true. And so what you believe, it's the driving force behind all your decisions and everything that you're making, all your life choices. It affects every part of your life, how you see the world around you.
All right, folks, that's what we encourage folks to do here on Prophecy Focus, is to have a biblical worldview. All right, with that in mind, let's go and take a look a little bit more. How did Karl Marx lead to communism? And Josh, I think we've got some good ideas here that will help us understand that. So feel free and take it.
So Karl Marx is the sole person who proposed the idea of Marxism. Communism, which we're talking about right now, is derived from the ideology of Marxism. Communism is the practical application based on Marxism and all that ideology that involves. Communism is a type of government that governs a particular sector or a political movement.
All right, so let's just pull this all together, folks. What we're seeing starting, and if you look at other countries, we were talking about a few of them earlier this evening. When you look at Russia, when you look at China, when you look at Cuba, when you look at other major countries that have adopted communism, and there's many more, it is destructive. It is taking people and crushing who they are. It is making everybody, if you will, get the same, what they call wages, but it's basically, you're told what you're going to do, you're told when you're going to do it, you're told when you're going to work and where you're going to work, and this is how much money you're going to get, and you will be happy. You're forced into that ideology. Josh, I see that as a anti-biblical, anti-worldview kind of government.
Well, it goes way past the boundaries that God placed on government, as we talked about earlier in this series in Genesis 9. When he established it, he gave it specific job to do, to protect the people and watch over them. And what you just described goes way past the boundaries that God set up when he established government.
All right. Now, again, you say, well, Brother Rich, you're making political statements. What we're trying to do, again, is see that these governmental situations are simply moving on the track that we know they have to go to in order to get to the prophetic fulfillment. So again, whether you embrace these concepts or not isn't the point. The point is these things have to happen on that slippery slope that's going to lead to one day a world dictator coming on the scene. The world is going to be in chaos. The world is going to be a mess. The world is going to be in a violent uproar. The world is going to be in famine. The world is going to be in economic distress. And all of a sudden, this marvelous miracle worker shows up, known as the Antichrist, and all of a sudden gets the world's attention, and things begin to happen to put him in that worldwide position as the satanic leader of the world. Well, Josh, what I think would be helpful, because when we're talking about communism, let's look at, and we can just bullet point these concepts. These are things, if you will, that the scriptures basically point out that are, if you will, not following a communist way of thinking. And I think it would help us just to get a few of these ideas now.
So the Bible promotes things like stewardship, caring for one's own property. It promotes saving our finances and the things that God has given to us. It promotes private property. Is actually part of the Mosaic Law, was ownership of property. The dignity of work, Ephesians 4:28. We've talked about that here on the program. It condemns covetousness, which drives a lot of these Marxist theories. Is like, you've got too much, I want some of it, so I'm going to covet what you have. And then, of course, condemning theft, again, going back to the law, and again in Ephesians 4:28.
Yeah, absolutely. What communism does is it basically takes from everybody, and the government decides you're going to get this, you're going to get this. It's not on meritocracy. It's based on this is what the government says you will get. Now, again, I understand those that are going through tough times, those that are, if you will, that can't work or unable to work, those type of things, that have legitimate reasons. I understand that those type of people definitely need to be taken care of. But what this is, it's very interesting because the Bible makes it very clear, and this is a Christian principle, that the laborer is worthy of his wages. In other words, God wants us to work. He didn't give us these bodies to sit in a chair and watch TV or play video games. Right. Not that that's bad in itself, but not something I choose to do. But they get to work, get out there and use this body to produce something.
Yeah, if we go back to Genesis chapter 2, before sin ever entered the world, God created work and gave Adam and Eve work to do. So we know work is not evil, it's a good thing, and God expects us to do it if we can.
Absolutely. So biblical principles, and we're just pointing out a few, are important to understanding why these worldwide systems that are forming are not on a biblical plane. All right, Josh, now I'm excited about this next section that we're going to do. We're going to take a few minutes. We're going to go through Revelation 13. We're going to go through the three things that Satan is going to put into play. So we're going to explain a little bit about Revelation 13 during that tribulation time, and then we're going to close the program. Why did this happen? Why is God allowing this 7 years of horrible things, and especially the last 3.5 years when the Satanic Trinity is in control, which is exactly, Revelation 13 is the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, known as the Great Tribulation, when it absolutely is going to be horrible on this earth. So Josh, let's start with Revelation 13. We'll read quickly and then we'll try and explain some of this.
All right, the Apostle John again writing, "Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like that of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority."
All right, now we literally could take an hour to discuss these two verses, and we don't have that kind of time. So let's just pull it all together so we understand what's happening. What these two verses are basically saying is that the Antichrist, and here's the simplistic piece of it, basically he's going to have worldwide power. All the things mentioned here, we go back to Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, other prophetic places which point out about all the countries, all the empires that have ever existed. Everything will be pointed to the Antichrist, the beast, who will have a massive amount of power. Well, how does he get that power? Why are people drawn to him? How's this going to play out? The next couple of verses tell us.
And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon, Satan, who gave authority to the beast, the Antichrist, and gave worship, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him?"
So here's what happens. Every single person out there, probably, man, with a few exceptions, has a cell phone. All of a sudden, the Antichrist comes up. Of course, he won't be called the Antichrist. He'll be given some name that will point him out as the world leader, if you will. Well, what happens to him? He basically, it appears he's assassinated. Every single person sees this. They're upset. They're like, oh, we just lost this great guy that's done whatever marvelous political thing that he's going to do, according to Revelation 6, 1 and 2. He's going to come on the scene with a bow but no arrows. In other words, a tremendous political move is going to be made to give him recognition. All of a sudden, breaking news, our world leader has been killed, or at least it appears he's been killed. What happens? He's brought back from the dead. Boom, everybody sees it, they're marvelous. Whatever it's going to be, however this is going to be, it gets the whole world's attention. What happens? It's unbelievable. Verse 4, they see the Antichrist brought back to life, if you will. They worship Satan. Now, how in the world they're going to know to worship Satan is beyond me, but this Bible, we know what's going to happen. They look to the dragon, to Satan. They look at Antichrist. They worship him. One world what? Religion. This is the start of the one world religion, second half of the tribulation, when the Antichrist basically looks like he's raised from the dead. All right, very quickly, let's look at how this is going to transpire. So right now, we live in the time of the Gentiles. We've been under this condition since the Jewish people were kicked out of Israel in 586 BC. Yes, many of the Jewish people have returned, but they don't have all their land. They're not in control yet, and that will stay up and through when the Antichrist is on the scene. What is going to end that, of course, is we currently live in the tribulation time period, or in the church age time period. When the church age ends at the rapture of the church, that 7-year tribulation period, Revelation 6 to 19:10, will kick in when the Antichrist is ruling. All right, so let's go to the next section. Basically, in that middle of that 7-year tribulation period is when Revelation 13 kicks in. So right in the middle of that black section of the graph is when Antichrist gets his power. Now, how can we prove that? Well, I suggest we go to the Bible. Let's look at the Revelation 13, verse 5, and it tells us how long the Antichrist will be in power.
And he, Antichrist, was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he, Antichrist, opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to the Antichrist to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation.
Every tribe, tongue, and nation, one world government. Already have the one world religion in place. We'll now have the one world government in place. That 42 months, by the way, how do we know that that is the last half of the 7-year tribulation period? Because you go back to Revelation chapter 12 when Satan is cast out of heaven. Remember, what starts the tribulation period? The Antichrist, Josh, what does he make with the Jewish people at the beginning of the tribulation?
Well, he makes a treaty with them, an agreement of protection for them.
A peace treaty, right?
Right.
All right, so for 3.5 years, the Antichrist basically has protected Israel. What changes the Antichrist position on Israel? Revelation chapter 12 tells us this. Satan gets kicked out of heaven, he's thrown down the earth, and he is mad. Why? Because he knows that his time is short, 3.5 years. Revelation 13 tells us 42 months, 3.5 years is exactly how long the Great Tribulation, when Antichrist will come out against the Jewish people, all those who come to Christ during those first 3.5 years are subject to death. All right, let's go to verse 8 very quickly.
All who dwell on the earth will worship the Antichrist, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
All right, and then we go on, and Revelation 11 through the end of the chapter talks about an individual named the false prophet, third member of the satanic trinity. What we've looked at over these last 5 programs is the progression that's going to get us to this spot, that slippery slope from the welfare state to socialism to Marxism to neo-Marxism to communism, all leading up to what? People will be conditioned to accept the one world government at that time. Why? And we're not there yet in America, so we're not quite maybe as astute about these things as some other countries are, but it's all leading to that one world government. Now, Josh, we've got to close out, and here's the big question. Why? Why is God going to allow this horrible 7 years of tribulation? I want you to take Isaiah because it explains exactly why.
Isaiah 9, 6 and 7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this.
You have heard these verses recited in Christmas plays since I was a little child. Do you know what? The only thing that applies to Christmas is that first phrase, for unto us a child is born, speaking about the first advent of Jesus Christ. Unto us a son is given when he was crucified. Then what's going to happen? Jesus Christ's return, and then the one world government underneath Jesus Christ himself will take place. 7 years of tribulation, wiping out everything that is evil and offensive to God. Why? Because in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 7, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, will take his rightful place in this world as the true Son of God, as the true Messiah, as the one that all people should and must worship. That's what's coming. 7 years of horrible tribulation to prepare for the coming of the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, the Lord of Lords. Folks, I implore you, if you've never placed your faith and trust in Christ, would you do it today? Well, thanks once again for watching us right here on Prophecy Focus.